Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows, and welcome to the Cellar at Marble, a restaurant we haven't been to for a while on the show. So I thought I'd drop in, see if there are any updates to this fabulous cellar, the incredible menu, and grab some lunch in between, introducing you to two very cool wine experiences that make up the rest of this week's show. A little later on, it's aromatic wine from places like Austria, Germany, and the east of France, the Alsace region, wines that are impossible to miss on aroma and palate, and wines that you won't find often in South Africa, but that you seize upon when you get the opportunity. And then chef Wandile Mabaso, who has Les Creatifs, he's travelled all over the world and has translated his Soweto roots via the prism of international cooking into something very special in Bryanston, and even more so when he teams up with Johannes Richter, the chef behind the living room at Summerhill, a recent South African restaurant of the year, and together with his wife Johanna, one of the great sommeliers of South Africa, a real home of great food and wine, they came together for an incredibly special experience. I'll kick that off in just a moment. I did want to show you, though, some of the wine here, and this is why I love this cellar. There's some great South African wine. Take Peter Allen and his Crystallums, or if you like the more Burgundian style, some of the wines of Hannes Storm and his Pinot Noir. The Thai-Bosch Crescendo, been around for such a little period of time in its reinvention and already become a modern classic of South African wine. Some of the Creation Pinot Noir, some of the Spider Pig, don't let the label fool you. There's some very serious wine in there. Some Uva Mira sitting on the slopes of Stellenbosch. But also, if you really want to splash out, there's some Romani Conti in here. There's some Sassicaia in here, and all in slightly older vintages. If you're willing to spend a fair amount of money on some world-class, iconic French Italian wine, then Marble is the place to come to. While you weigh that up and see if your bank manager will authorize swiping the credit card for a Super Tuscan or one of the great Grand Crus of Burgundy, I'm going to take you across town to Bryanston, where I sat down with Wandile and with Joe and got an understanding of how two chefs who are normally creatures of fiercely protective territories and egos to match were able to come together so happily to create an absolutely fabulous concert of food and wine. Usually Dan Really Likes Wine looks fairly exclusively at the art of wine, the enjoyment and indulgence thereof, and that's not what we're scrapping for this particular visit, but we're adding something pretty important, because it's not just wine that brings me to Les Creatifs, the restaurant that already at just after 8 in the morning has got a queue of about 100 people outside it in Bryanston, but the food that lights up this restaurant more than ever, because not only is Wandile Mabaso, the world-renowned globe-trotting Soweto-born chef, a guest today, but so too is Johannes Richter, the German KwaZulu-Natalite, who is together with Wandile cooking up something very, very special. And I know it's not just the food, Wandile, that makes this such a special occasion, but you've got one of the true superstars of modern South African cooking at the moment. When you opened 5 years ago, was this the kind of thing you thought, I'd love to do this one day, bring in other great chefs and create occasions like this that say so much, not just about you, but about your restaurant?
Yes, definitely. I always looked for that or towards that. But it's quite difficult because in South Africa we don't really mix as chefs a lot, and we admire each other from a distance, and the cuisines are always different. It's always a clash. So luckily for us, when we met, it was really natural. I respect him as a chef, and you are right, he's probably one of the best we have in the country. And I thought, our cuisines are very similar as well. And I thought maybe this is a chance, and after 5 years, it's finally happening.
This is a pretty cool collaboration, Johannes. Talk me back to that meeting. How did a German Durbanite and a Soweto-born chef who's traveled the world find their paths cross?
Well, I think, Wandile and I have, said this in a couple of, or in dialogue and in a couple of interviews previously. Sometimes it takes someone to look at things from the outside to make the inside really understand what kind of a gem they have in front of them. And that's really, I think, also where our ideologies, our stylistic, our vision with the food that we serve and prepare kind of intertwine as well, is that we really want to showcase South Africa, and with different vantage points and from different angles, but our focus is local.
One of the things we celebrate a lot on this show is the prism through which you see food, and that prism in our case is wine. You guys are seeing food through some cultural prisms, and in your case, Johannes, you've worked at Michelin star restaurants in Berlin. You've got that background, and what for me is one of the most exciting food cities in Europe. You're now translating that to South Africa. How's that background influenced, dictated, spoken to the kind of food that you're producing today?
Hugely. I mean, I think, what both of us have is obviously that international vantage point, and that both of us learned classic French cuisine as our base. And what Berlin did obviously was tweak that a bit, and a lot of progressive thought got mixed with that. And at the time that Johanna and I were in Berlin, we were also, it was a time of change in a sense that regionality started becoming more and more prevalent in food, from the Nordic influence coming through from obviously mainly Denmark. And that's obviously something that has hugely influenced what we do, and something that you see a lot in the stylistic of food that we serve.
What about your food, Wandile? Here's a kid out of Soweto who's made it big around the world, done us proud, spent time in New York, spent time in France, but now come home. The food you will have seen around the world, I'm guessing, would have been a little different to the food you grew up with in Soweto. You've now been able to take that influence, this global influence, come back to Johannesburg. What's the end result?
Well, I think it's a mix of a lot of things. Like you say, I am from Soweto. I cooked in Miami first, where I worked with Jamaicans, Haitians, and Cubans in the kitchen, which were showing me other techniques of cooking and flavors. And then moving into New York City, I was literally spending all my time with Mexicans, to a point where I learned a bit of Spanish in the kitchen.
There's a very faint Spanish accent that comes through.
See.
So, you're fluent.
Yeah, fluent. So, and also moving to France, and moving to New York City, and working with Spanish chefs as well in Europe, and Italian chefs, and also having the classical background, and being this kid from Soweto who grew up with the fit cooks, the achas, the slab chips, the tripe, trotters, whatever we think that is South African food that we're actually here to redefine. It's put me exactly where I am today, and it's a fusion of a lot of things. But what I love about it is that it's authentic. It is a part of me, a part of my story, and a part of places and things that I've done that now I'm expressing and bringing it together and showcasing it to South Africa and representing the country.
The philosophy of you both seems to chime a lot in similar ways. The actual food, though, you create dishes that are very distinct. They are your own signatures. You've done something that not every chef would do, Wandile. You have invited a rival chef to come in to your home and to share your kitchen. Now, normally with chefs, we know that this ends up with frying pans flying across the kitchen and Gordon Ramsay language, and it makes a great television, but not always the most harmonious of restaurant scenes. How's this been in terms of putting the collaboration together?
No, I think it's actually been the opposite, actually. And we had a conversation about it, I think this morning or late last night. And we did say that, at this point, we are not here to show people that we can cook, or prove to people who can cook or who can't, who's better than the other, or if we can impress guests. I think we beyond that point. Our point is now all about responsibility, and bringing in this cuisine is our responsibility to the country, to the up and coming chefs, and to the future of our cuisine in this country. And we blend in naturally. There's no clashes at all. There's no rivalry at all. So it's quite the opposite. I think I'm very confident, and he's very confident in his cuisine and his team and his philosophy, and I'm the same, and we're just bringing it together. There's no clash whatsoever.
If you're watching this at home, this is our 17th take, because they started fighting on the previous 16. We'll pretend to believe you. It sounds far too harmonious to be chefs coming together, and yet I sense a really good energy between the two of you, Johannes.
Yeah, I think when we initially met, was always at some sort of award ceremony of some nature, and then Wandile visited us at the living room, and then we sat down, we had a glass of wine together, and really clicked, and then we chatted about this collaboration, and quintessentially what came out of it was that we both feel very strongly about identity in what we do, and feel strongly about the way that we think modern South African food needs identity as well. And we have different backgrounds, we have different takes on how we translate that identity into our restaurants, onto our plates. But that's the beauty of it, no? That this kind of mix and these different outlooks really showcase how great and how much wealth we have in SA.
Now, you've both got extraordinary CVs. You've both won all manner of awards. Restaurant of the Year a couple of years ago. Les Creatifs already has all sorts of accolades. All of which means absolutely nothing if you don't get the wine absolutely right and the dishes that go with the wine absolutely right. Traditional to start with some white wine. So Johannes, what is the dish that's going to speak to this white wine? Why have you chosen this wine? Or more pertinently, been told by your boss that this is the wine you will have with the dish?
Chef, yeah.
And why do you feel they come together?
Yeah, so we've chosen, our food is always very much governed by seasonality, because we're just reliant on local produce from our outlook point of view. Basically, the dish that we're bringing with is very much driven by guava, which are in season at the moment. And the guava comes in different stages of ripeness and also in different textures. And those tropical notes with that guava really work lovely with this Manscan white, which really embraces those characteristics. Honey plays a role, from acacia honey as well, in a fermented state as well as in a fresh state. The fermented side, we've worked a bit of koji into there, so like umami plays a big role in that, which is also lifted really nicely through the wine. And then we've got all of these indigenous bitter greens working into that plate, which also just brings out different nuances. And I think it was also, in a young South African collaboration, it was also important for us to showcase wines that are backed by young South African talent. And what the guys at Manscan do, we're a huge fan of. So showcasing that wine in this constellation is right. Yeah.
As a chef at the moment, is there a more exciting style of wine to work food into than South African white blends?
We are huge fans of white blends through the board. No, and it's something that I still kind of struggle to understand, why it's not a faster mover on wine lists these days. Where everyone's still kind of got the shutters on and is looking for single varietals, where the white blends that are coming out, especially with the South African varieties like Columbine, Shannon, driven blends, it just makes sense. It's just fun.
Certainly does. This wine is already tasting glorious, and throw in some of Johannes's culinary magic and we've got a hell of a very nicely done, Johanna. Very well done indeed. That's terrific. All right, that's our white pairing sorted out. Let's move over to our home chef. Now, you described something to me the other day when we were doing some filming together, and it basically sounded like you'd hit something with your car and you needed to get rid of the body because you were using everything imaginable in from the tail to the ears to the nose to the trotters. And this is historically in a lot of cultures, not just in Africa, it's that sense of nothing is going to go to waste. And you've taken that very traditional approach, thrown it into a very high-end culinary space, and I think spoken beautifully to where your background is.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was more of a collab idea, where we would say, what can we do with the lamb? And we used everything. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the horns, which I wanted to use as a saucier, but we really wanted to use everything. And the sauce itself is something we had to debate about. For him to actually even fly all the way up here, for us to redo that sauce and actually taste it and make sure it doesn't clash with any other of his dishes, which are spice-based. And then also to make sure that Johanna chooses the right wine for us to pair with. And we had to change that sauce to a pinotage sauce, actually, where we created a stock from lamb. And it took about 24 hours lamb stock from lamb bones. And then we then cooked the trotters in the very same stock the next day. Cooked the stomach as well in there. Had the raw liver and the raw heart as well, chopped up and added in there. and we created a farce from that, which is almost like a sausage-based kind of meat. And we glaze that with lemon confit, so it gives it the sweet and spicy flavor profile. And we decided to use the rack as well, where we took out the loin from the rack and we serve that, which is grilled. Got a smoky feel to it as well, which is very South African. Reminds you of a braai. Pepper crusted with fennel seeds, coriander seeds, and black peppercorn. And we've got on each side madumbe, which is infused with acha. And then we've got normal potato, which is infused with basil as well. And it's quite a very intense dish, and it's very complex in flavor, where you get every element of sweet, spicy, which is a big part of my cuisine. And
I'm amazed Johanna's still talking to you, because to try and find a wine that's going to pair with this extraordinary array of flavors.
We tasted it together last night. She was very worried, but I think she's confident now.
So what are we
Because
drinking?
the wine is just as complex, I believe, as that. So this is a Cap Franc, and it's called the Weather Report,
I know it well.
which is, I believe, is a special edition. And I love this wine. It's not overwhelming. The tannins are just balanced. It's a really balanced wine, and gives you that notes of fruitiness as well. Because we got a lot of pepper and spices on the dish, it works well and balances it, and it also works well on the acidic notes, or the acidic ingredients that we have as well on the dish. And it also helps the tannins, as mild as they are, they also break down the richness of the lamb. So I think it's really a perfect balance, and well done to Johanna for this. It's never easy.
A sense of understanding the balance of wine is making sure that the acidity and the body and the intensity and the alcohol are all sitting in concert. They've now got to sit in concert with another band playing next door. In the case of your dish, we're going to find out a little later today just how well they've gone. But I think this is going to be a sensational pairing. And even though some of the elements of that dish terrify me from a very sheltered Western kitchen upbringing, I'm going to give it my best go, albeit have medical care on standby. Before we wrap up, because I know you guys have got people to go and shout at in the kitchen and pretend to work, because I know both as head chefs, you haven't done a stroke of actual work in the last decade. But before you do rush off for that piece of theatre, just very quickly, chefs come in two spaces. They either can't wait to tell you how good they are, what they've done, how amazing they are with the awards, or we get the opposite, you two guys who are very different to that, and it takes a little work to squeeze out from each other. So I'm going to give you the job on each other. Johannes, what is it for you that makes Wandile stand out as a chef?
I think getting to know him better now, as well over this course of time, especially where we've worked together closely to make this really, really exciting collaboration happen. I think Wandile really lets his plates talk for him, and that's something that I think gives what is done here at Les Creatifs real identity. And that's one of the aspects that I really enjoy. And the other one is obviously that we share a lot of mutual respect, both being owners and head chefs of the restaurant, being hands-on in the business, and obviously dealing with those challenges, and also enjoying the independence that gives us.
Wandile, what is it for you that makes the German culinary ambassador to Durban such a rock star?
I mean, he looks like a rock star, right?
Yeah.
This he does.
I mean, there's a few things, but I'd say the one thing I'd say is authenticity, which is something that you don't find in this industry a lot, especially with chefs, with egos, with all sorts of things. It's humility, authenticity, because at his level, and the way he cooks and the quality of his food at his level, you'd expect such a robust attitude and big-headedness, but the ego is not there. Authentic, human, and humility, and once again, just like you said, let the plate speak for the chef.
I'm sure
We'll
that
mellow it down with good wine.
it's always the perfect lubricant to good friendship. Guys, I suspect this is going to be the first of many because there's obviously a natural chemistry between the two of you, brought about by not just a love of food, but an ability to do some rather special stuff with it, even if some of it is slightly frightening. Thank you for this. Really excited to see how it all comes together. And while I've had a number of meals here, I'm yet to visit you in KwaZulu-Natal. That is on the horizon. And then I get to meet the person you report into, who's given us all this fabulous wine, and see how the magic of the living room really comes together.
Looking forward to that.
So there we go. It's a wonderful collaboration between two of the most exciting talents in cooking in South Africa at the moment. And I've got the tough job of trying it all and washing it down with pretty good wine. What you saw there was a conversation of two of South Africa's most exciting chefs. What you didn't see was the aftermath and a sprawling 7-course meal, including that head-to-tail lamb where literally everything was used in one magnificent dish. And it was great to see two chefs who normally sit in a space where ego is king coming together in that shared space of Wandiles and producing such a magical meal. The return fixture is going to be down in KwaZulu-Natal next year. I am top of that list. Now, Les Creatifs is one of Johannesburg's top restaurants. So too is Marble. And this particular space is one I spend a lot of time in, the private dining room. It's been set up for lunch a little later, but before lunch kicks off, I've managed to nab it. I've also managed to steal away one of Johannesburg's coolest young sommeliers. Nancy, lovely to see you and lovely to be here in a restaurant that's it's a pretty awesome space to be able to call your office, isn't it?
To be honest with you, beautiful space, beautiful restaurant. I mean, to be here, personally myself, it feels good. It feels good, yeah.
And you get to do what you love, which is working with wine. Tell me about that journey. When did you first fall in love with wine?
So I'm a Durban guy. I'm from Durban. I used to work for a restaurant called Havana Grill in Suncoast Casino as a waiter for many years. And it happens that at that time, I didn't know anything about wine. I didn't know the difference between any other grapes, but when it comes to wine sales, I was the number one. So when it comes to wine sales, so I was always on the top when it comes to sales because I was just selling just to make money. But then the owner of that restaurant, Martin Lombard, who is late, he approached me and says, I can see every month when I'm checking my wine sales, your name always comes out. And then is it because if you love wine or is it because of you know about wine? I said, absolutely no. I don't love wine. I don't know nothing about wine. I'm just doing it to make money. And then he says, no, I don't want you to do it like that in my restaurant. Rather do it properly. So I'm going to take you to study. You're going to do an entry-level one, which is, I think it was Lobster Inc. or Let's Lobster at the time. I did level 1, and then I visited some of the farms in the Cape. About 6-7 farms in the Cape I visited at the time. And then a few years later, I left Havana Grill, and then I moved to Southern Sun. So also the same journey happened at Southern Sun. Focus was on wine. At that time, I had now started to understand a little bit more about wine, but also still as a waiter. Then from Southern Sun, I joined Oyster Box Hotel. Now, when I joined Oyster Box Hotel, I was looking for a job as a waiter since I had an experience. Then one of the general manager, one of the food and beverage managers there, he looked at my CV and he saw I've done some of the courses and was like, no, I'm not going to make you a waiter. I would rather make you a wine steward. I was like, what is a wine steward? And then he explains to me, your job is going to be, focus on wine and topping up savings and stuff. Then this is where it started picking up. And I was like, okay, fair enough. I did the course and then I joined Oyster Box and then I did my level 2 at Oyster Box. I did also a Distill Inter Hotel Challenge where I became number 3 in the world. So it's been a very good journey. And then I moved to Johannesburg. When I moved to Johannesburg, I got a call from this beautiful place, Marble, when I said, no, Vikas will be moving to Cape Town. And they wanted someone strong, someone with a good experience to be the one running the place. And I was like, okay, let me go for it. And I'm still here. It's a beautiful place. It's a lovely place to be.
And it's not a small job to take on, because if you look across Johannesburg, there's probably not a better restaurant cellar than the cellar you have here at Marble, ranging from some of the best of South African to some vintage French, with the price tags to match.
Yes.
Was it a little nerve-wracking moving into this space?
So when I moved to Johannesburg, I did my research. So Marble was one of the targeted restaurants that I wanted to be. So at that time, obviously, Vikas is still here and he has some of the junior somms. There was no gap, if I can put it like that. There was no gap for another som. So when they called me and they said this is the person that they're looking for, and to fill up this gap, it was a bit a bit scary, to be honest with you, because this is a group that has been known very, very well in Johannesburg. So when you join this group, it is a very well-owned machine, yes, but you have to sort of like fit in and find a way to make things work according, not sort of change everything, because we might change it to right, might change it to bad, because it's already well-owned machine. So just run with the flow, make sure that everything is running smooth, which is I've been trying to do for past few months.
And has it been a smooth journey? Has it been a happy journey?
It's been very happy. It is Johannesburg is way different from with Durban. If I can look at the point of sales when it comes to wines here at Marble and go back to Oyster Box or Havana Grill, nothing matches this place, to be very honest with you. Nothing matches this when it comes to wine sales or people loving wine. A lot of clients that comes to Marble, I know them from Oyster Box. But we see those clients maybe once or twice at Oyster Box, because remember they only go there to visit when it's season time, December or any other school holidays and stuff. But here you get to see people in Johannesburg. They love wine. People in Johannesburg, they understand wine, they appreciate wine. So it's a very good journey so far.
It's a journey that involves interaction with all manner of wine. I think it'd be quite terrifying if this was your very first sommelier job, because there is so much to do.
Yes.
And a great chef to work with.
Yes, yes.
All of this wine to play with. I gave you what I think could have been quite a difficult task, because I said I want one single wine. I want you to pour it for me, and I want you to tell me why. Now I can see from our glass we've got a lighter style red here. What have you chosen, and more importantly, Nati, why?
So I've chosen a Pinot Noir 2022 vintage, which is Karatara. The reason why I've chosen this, as you can see, is as well the glasses that I've decided to use for pouring the Pinot Noir. So these are Benedict glasses, which we call them Zaltos Piccola, but they work very well when it comes to a Pinot Noir lighter style wine. I've chosen this Pinot Noir because of it still has a bit of structure, even though it's a lighter one, but it still has a bit of body. If you can maybe compare it to like a Burgundy, a French Pinot Noir, you're still getting that. It's beautiful, nice fruit, but a little bit of structure, a little bit of elegance in here, quite easy in your palate. And I'm using this glasses so that it will help to open up as well.
And also made by a fine winemaker, no longer there, of course, but I think this would have been his last vintage, if memory serves, before he left for Wellington.
Yes, and also it's a wine that is doing very well with us in terms of selling. Most people like it. When we recommend it, we know we're not going to be wrong with the recommendation, because it's one of the best Pinot Noir you can find in South Africa.
It is a delight to drink, and it also reflects, if you're starting your Burgundy journey, this is a nice South African version. This is a restaurant where, if you've got the means, there's a bottle of Romani Conti or two that you could shell out for if you're feeling particularly wealthy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, it's a lovely wine. It's also a lovely story. Durban's loss is Johannesburg's gain.
It's a gain for Johannesburg.
And it's clearly you're settling in. Vickers, I know, is heading down to Cape Town. So
he's heading to Cape Town, but to be honest with you, I really appreciate the time that he's spending with me as well. I know that Vickers is a very, very good som, and with all the experience that he has, he's sharing it with me. So before he leaves to Cape Town, I'm trying by all means to get that experience out of him. Then, I became the boss of Johannesburg.
It's a beautiful wine. It's a beautiful restaurant. It's a very cool sommelier as my guide over lunch today. I need to order some lunch. While I do that, I'm going to take you back to a tasting I did not that long ago, where the team at Great Domains took us into some parts of the wine world that we don't see that much of in South Africa, heading to places like Alsace and Germany and Austria, and finding wines that are very much directed by the aromatic nature of the varietals they use. Amongst others, Miguel Chan was there to cast his expert Mauritian opinion on the wine we had. A pretty good night and some pretty good wine. For most South Africans, the wines of France will mean Bordeaux, Burgundy, possibly some Rhone or some Champagne, and the wines of Europe beyond that, well, Italy and Tuscany and maybe some Rioja, which makes tonight's night of European indulgence both different and very welcome. It's an evening out with Derek Hilton and the Great Domains team, and there's not a Bordeaux or Burgundy in sight, no Tuscany, no Rioja, nothing you might be expecting. Instead, it's wine from Alsace, it's wine from Austria, and it's wine from Germany. It's a celebration of very aromatic styles of wine, stuff we don't often see enough of, and stuff I particularly enjoy.
We've got a really cool tasting lined up for some of our private clients and a few members of the trade, and we've themed tonight's tasting as an aromatics tasting. So we've got some really cool wines from France, Germany and Austria, involving grapes like Riesling, Pinot Blanc, and then also some interesting couple of Pinot Noirs that we're doing. And I think these are regions that are really underrated, underappreciated, and the only way to get people to get exposed to these wines is obviously to do like a walk around tasting like this, where people in their own time can go around and taste these amazing wines. And yeah, tonight we've sort of lined up the 10 wines in almost ascending order of sort of sugar, because there's obviously a fair bit of sugar in certain of these styles of wine, and it just helps people sort of taste their way through, and I hope everyone enjoys it because we love the wine. We've got one particular wine from Austria, which is the first time we're sort of showcasing it, from an estate called Emmerich Knoll, one of the great Austrian producers. Razor sharp acidity on their Rieslings, really interesting, awesome wine. And then a name that all fine wine lovers would know, which is Egon Müller, probably the most sought after German producer from the Mosel. And then we've also added 2 new producers, one from Alsace called Madder, where there's a Pinot, and we've got a Pinot Blanc and a Riesling, which are fantastic. And then the other producer is Peter Jakob Kuhn from Germany. And the catalyst for us importing that wine was drinking one of his wines in a restaurant in Paris, where the sommelier served us the Pinot Noir blind, and all of us said it was Burgundy. So obviously, as sort of, I'd like to think, Burgundy specialists, we were all super embarrassed. And then he put it on the table and he says it's German. And then we were like, what is this wine? And that's where the whole thing started with Peter Jakob Kuhn, and he does amazing Rieslings, and really cool to expose his wines to the sort of Gauteng public tonight.
The event's gone really well. It was always going to be, well, I say it was always going to be, I was worried that it was going to be a little bit trickier to market, because aromatic wines are quite hit and miss. You know, people either love it or they hate it. And I thought we were a little bit ambitious to do an event like this as the first one, and the response to it's been overwhelmingly good. So I think it's quite interesting to see that people are so prepared to be adventurous and to try new things, even if they can't pronounce the name of the wine just yet, because I think it took all of us a moment to get our tongues around that. But yeah, it's gone well, it's going well, and hopefully we'll get some good feedback afterwards.
Well, the beauty of today is the theme being aromatic. And aromatic is like having, if you remember going on the first date many years ago, so it's one of those things that you never forget. There is an element of seduction with aromatic grape varieties. And the showcase tonight is to have the opportunity to look at Pinot Noir in Alsace and in Rheingold, Germany. And everyone thinks that Burgundy is the holy grail. Yes, it is to an extent, but it shows you today around the world there are beautiful red wine out of Pinot Noir, made outside Burgundy, made outside Oregon, made outside Emelanada or Central Otago in New Zealand, where you have that point of seduction, yet complex enough to make it an intriguing glass of red at the table to lubricate conversation over many hours. And on top of that, what we've seen tonight is the diversity of Riesling. It's kind of a misnomer amongst many consumers out there thinking that Riesling is sweet, which is not the case. Tonight, we've seen the diversity, the style of Riesling being bone dry to being super fresh, super racy, and yet those with a dash of sugar. So you cannot actually stereotype Riesling as being a sweet white wine or a sweet style of wine, when actually there are lovely, bright, racy, especially for those that love their Sauvignon Blanc or their dry white wine. Time to change. It's 2024. Be adventurous. Seek out there. Break the bank. Life is short. drink some really good Alsace and German Riesling. There's a whole world to explore out there. Be adventurous. There was a lovely Austrian Riesling also, which was absolutely beautiful. It was bone dry, it was gastronomic, i.e. food friendly. You can, anyone around there that loves cooking, spending time in the kitchen, can get super creative with that kind of bottling. And tonight revelation was a Pinot Blanc from Alsace, a mutation of Pinot Noir. It was made in an absolutely gorgeous, energetic, and you can start a meal, you can finish a meal, anything in between, and especially with a cheese platter. Imagine that, with creamy cheese at room temperature, crusty warm baguette, and a bottle of Alsace Pinot Blanc that was on show tonight. It's heaven.
So that was quite a tasting from places that certainly in the South African wine world are pretty exotic. Some really aromatic wines, some really exciting wines in that list. And I suspect if there's one restaurant in Johannesburg where you would be able to find a couple of those, it would be here in Marble, which is home to great wine and also, as per the kitchen behind me, some of the finest food in town as well. And not just the steaks, but across the board, David He's working magic and some really, really world-class food. So that's it for this week. A big thank you to the team at Les Creatifs a little earlier on, to Johannes and to Wandile, who put together such a fabulous, fabulous meal, and to Johanna, who is one of the top sommeliers in the country and a very welcome import. Thanks to Nati for guiding us around Marble and giving us such a wonderful, wonderful introduction to his story of Durban to Johannesburg and now Marble and the wine team. And thank you again to the guys at Great Domains, Derek and team, some really fascinating wine. That does it for this week. Lunch now calls. I'm going to order something from that fabulous New York style open flame, and that should keep me going until next week. Dan really likes wine with Norman Goodfellows. Goodbye.